All right, so this has been presented to the working group a couple of times, but as a quick recap for people that aren't necessarily familiar with it, the problem that we're trying to solve here is that in web pages today, every frame is basically an island into itself. The performance characteristics of each page are sort of isolated, or each frame are isolated within that frame, and you need to explicitly coordinate with embedded content if you want to actually share that. This is certainly a problem with third parties because the problem of explicitly coordinating with every possible embedder is intractable. So we want to come up with a standard way of doing this that maybe can be implicit. Because in the end, performance problems themselves are often page level, not frame level. And the top level page really needs to be aware of what's going on in the whole page to be able to make reasonable decisions. So our proposed solution is to basically allow embedded content to opt in. So an explicit opt-in to implicit sharing of performance timeline data with your embedders. There's a link here to the actual concrete proposal. I'll share the slides afterwards once I can move them to somewhere shareable. But this is now underway. So Justpreet's been working on actually implementing this. We're doing this in a couple of different stages. So immediately, we are working on just same origin frames. So basically, if you have same origin content on your page, the ability to easily say, please just get me all of their, all the child entries from all same origin frames. Starting out with just get entries, but then hopefully moving on to performance observer as a second step. And then finally, we're going to extend this to cross origin frames with the actual explicit opt-in. So to make each of those a bit more concrete, same origin frames, we should be able to get this out in Chrome M110, which is just in a couple of months, behind a flag, obviously. And the idea is that performance.get entries by name, get entries by type, would just have a Boolean flag that says, please also include all child frames. And if you do that, you get all performance entries from all same origin frames on the page, each one including a reference to that window object so that you can refer back to where they originated. Step 2 would be roughly the same thing, same scope, but doing this with Performance Observer. This is a more complicated example that I've posted in or pasted in from the proposal doc. But the green link on the bottom here shows that when you make your observer, you would just say include children true as part of these observer options. And then again, you could do things with the source attribute on each of the entries. So in this case, this basically just groups them all together, segments them by source, and then you can act on them individually. And then finally, the last step of this is going to be to do this cross origin, which is exactly the same mechanism, except that we require that the embedded content send a document policy in the headers saying, who would you like to share your timeline with? Right? By default, this is nobody. But you could share it with star if you expect to be embedded everywhere, or you can provide a list of approved embedders, and anybody else would not be able to get those timeline entries. And then it will work exactly the same way, except that when we walk the frame tree, we'll find all of the frames that have opted in. So questions for the group for discussion here. So we're doing this deliberately in this order, in the hopes that maybe some of these checkpoints might be useful to experiment with on their own. So I'd like to hear back from people who might actually end up using this, whether same origin frames is a useful sort of like midpoint, like would you check that? And also, would it be worth developing a polyfill to do the whole thing? Obviously, a polyfill does require explicit cooperation because you'd have to include the same JavaScript code everywhere. But it might give a feel for how this is going to work in practice and see whether you can get interesting results on that. That is the end of the presentation. If you want to stop the recording before, I think there were a couple of comments and now a hand.